Imagine a small town buried in snow, where every window hides a secret and every whisper could mean survival. A 12-year-old girl sits by the frost-covered glass, dreaming of freedom, while the storm outside mirrors the storm inside her home. But one night, when fear turns to courage, she runs into the blizzard and fate leads her to a police officer and his loyal German shepherd who will change everything. Before the story begins, tell us where you are watching from and share your thoughts in the comments below. Willow Creek, Montana, a small town where winters stretch longer than memory, where the sky turns pewter before dusk, and the snow never truly melts but waits, layered upon itself like a quiet secret. The houses here crouch under the weight of white, their roofs sighing beneath the cold. On the northern ridge, where the pine trees stand like sentinels against the wind, sits a weather-beaten two-story house with flaking blue paint and smoke that rarely rises from its chimney. That house belongs to the Miller family, though calling it a home would be generous. Inside, 12-year-old Lila Miller sits at the edge of her bed, tracing a faded pattern on the quilt that once belonged to her grandmother. Her hair is chestnut brown, long and tangled, often hiding the bruises she tries not to touch. She is small for her age, her frame delicate as if built for silence. Her eyes, a stormy gray, always seem to be watching for something, a door opening too quickly, a tone turning sharp. Lila has learned the language of footsteps, of how air changes before anger enters a room. Downstairs, the sound of a refrigerator hums next to the soft clink of glass. Ray Miller, her stepfather, is a man in his late 40s whose broad shoulders and strong arms once made him a promising mechanic. But that was before the plant shut down 2 years ago. Now, his strength serves only his temper. His beard grows uneven, his eyes bloodshot not from tears but from whiskey. He wears the same stained work jacket each day, as though refusing to admit that the world has moved on without him. Ray used to laugh, loud, full-bellied laughs that shook the walls. But those echoes have long since frozen in the rafters. At the kitchen counter, Carla Miller, Lila's mother, stirs a pot of soup she's already reheated twice. Carla is 38, once the kind of woman who sang while brushing her daughter's hair. Her face still holds traces of beauty, soft and freckled, but her eyes now carry a constant haze, not from drink, but from surrender. She moves quietly, careful not to draw attention, her posture slightly bent, as though years of apology have reshaped her spine. Once, she worked at the library downtown, where she loved to recommend books to the elderly and children alike. But Ray didn't like her talking to strangers, so she quit. The house smells faintly of smoke and boiled potatoes. Outside, the wind howls like something alive, scraping snow against the siding. The dinner table sits under a flickering bulb, its surface scarred with cigarette burns. Lila comes down when her mother calls. She always does, on time, never too slow. Her socks slip a little on the linoleum as she takes her seat across from Ray. "Sit up straight," he mutters without looking at her. His voice is gravel-coated in exhaustion. "Yes, sir." Carla places a bowl in front of him, her hands trembling slightly. "It's warm," she whispers. Ray grunts, takes a spoonful, and immediately grimaces. "You call this food? I'll fix it, just—" The sound of the spoon hitting the table cuts her off, metal against wood. The air turns brittle. Lila's small hands move instinctively to her lap, hiding beneath the tablecloth. Ray's glare shifts to her. "What are you staring at?" "Nothing," she murmurs, eyes downcast. "Answer me when I talk to you." "Nothing, sir." His chair scrapes violently as he pushes back, pacing to the counter to refill his glass with amber liquid. Carla stares at the soup, tears she doesn't allow to fall pooling in her lashes. The wind outside screams louder. Somewhere in the house, a loose shutter bangs, like a warning or a heartbeat. Later that night, when the shouting fades and the glass stops clinking, Lila retreats to the basement. The stairs creak beneath her weight, each step echoing in the dim light. The basement smells of damp wood and rust. In the far corner behind an old shelf of paint cans, there's a hollow section in the wall, a secret she discovered last summer when hiding from one of Ray's tempers. Lila kneels and pries away a loose board, revealing a small tin box inside. Inside that box is her journal, wrapped in plastic and tied with string. Its cover is worn, its pages filled with tiny handwriting. The kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who can't say things out loud. She writes in it only when she's sure the house sleeps. Tonight, her words shake across the paper. I wish I could be like the snow. Cold doesn't hurt it. It just falls, soft and quiet, and disappears when no one looks. A sound makes her freeze. Footsteps above, a door closing hard. She tucks the box back, replaces the board, and presses her palms against the floor until her breathing evens. Upstairs, Ray has fallen asleep on the couch, the television glowing faint blue across his face. Carla sits at the kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. She glances at the clock, 11:48 p.m., then toward the stairwell, as if she knows her daughter is awake somewhere, waiting for a sign that never comes. Carla's dependency on Ray is not love. It is habit formed from fear and the hollow comfort of not being alone. Her own childhood was shaped by abandonment. Her father left when she was 7. Her mother drifted in and out of relationships that blurred together. To her, chaos feels like home, and silence feels like guilt. The only warmth left in the house comes from the old space heater in Lila's room, which hums like a lullaby with a sore throat. Lila crawls beneath the quilt, her eyes fixed on the frost tracing patterns on the window pane. Somewhere beyond that glass, the town sleeps. The diner lights off, the gas station closed, snow covering the street signs. Across the road, Mrs. Dempsey, the neighbor, sits up in bed, knitting by lamplight. She's in her 60s, widowed, with kind eyes and an instinct for noticing what others overlook. Over the past months, she's heard things. Muffled arguments, something breaking, a girl's voice too quiet to be heard clearly. She's called the sheriff twice, but each time, Ray smoothed things over with the calm of a man who's learned to lie politely. Still, she keeps her phone close, just in case. The next morning, the snow falls heavier. Ray wakes late, grumbling about the power bill. Carla fixes breakfast in silence. Lila sits at the table, a bruise blooming faintly along her wrist where last night's argument turned physical. A lesson, as Ray called it. She hides it under the sleeve of her sweater. You going to school today? Carla asks softly. Ray snorts. School doesn't teach anything useful. She stays home till she learns respect. Lila looks at her mother, eyes pleading, but Carla lowers her gaze. Maybe just today, Ray, she starts, but his glare silences her. The kitchen feels smaller than ever. The smell of burnt toast mixes with the sourness of alcohol still lingering from last night. The walls seem to inch closer. Later, when Ray leaves to look for work, Carla breathes out a sigh she didn't know she was holding. She touches her daughter's shoulder. He's just stressed, honey. Things will get better. You'll see. But Lila doesn't answer. She knows her mother's words are a ritual, like prayer without belief. Outside, the snow keeps falling, gentle, endless, uncaring. That night, as the wind pushes through the cracks in the door, the family gathers for dinner again. The same table, the same soup, the same silence. Ray's mood is unreadable, which is worse than anger. Carla keeps her eyes on her plate. The camera of imagination zooms in. Lila's hand slowly moves to adjust her sleeve, covering a bruise shaped like the ghost of a hand. Her lips tremble, but she forces a spoonful of soup past them. The sound of wind whistling through the cracks becomes a kind of score, rising softly beneath the quiet. Ray reaches for his drink. Carla's hand flinches. A fork clatters onto the floor, a small accidental sound that feels like thunder in the silence. Ray's head turns sharply. Lila freezes, her breath catches. The sound of something breaking, glass shattering, fills the room. The frame cuts to black. The storm arrived without warning. By sunset, the ridges above Willow Creek had vanished beneath a gray curtain, and the roads shimmered with black ice. The world outside seemed to have folded into itself, leaving only the wind to roam free. Inside the Miller house, the light flickered again and again before surrendering to the dark. The only illumination came from the fire's weak glow in the living room, orange embers reflecting in half-empty bottles. Ray Miller sat slouched on the couch, boots still muddy, a fresh glass of whiskey balanced on his knee. His beard glistened with condensation, and his hands twitched with restless energy. The day had been another failure. No job, no calls, just long hours of pretending the world owed him something. He'd returned home colder than the wind, carrying the kind of silence that burns hotter than words. Carla moved quietly near the kitchen doorway. She'd lit a single candle, its flame trembling each time the draft slipped under the door. Her movements were careful, practiced, an instinct carved by years of anticipating tempers. She was dressed in a faded blue cardigan, threadbare at the cuffs, her hair tied up loosely, strands falling like wilted leaves. Every so often, she glanced toward the hallway, listening for her daughter. Upstairs, Lila sat by her window, clutching a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. The blizzard outside painted the world in shifting whites and silvers. She traced lines in the frost on the glass, pretending they were maps to somewhere far away. Anywhere but here. Her socks were mismatched, her sweater too thin for the season. And yet she stayed near the window because it felt like the only place air could reach her lungs. A door slammed below. "Carla!" Ray's voice tore through the quiet. She froze mid-step. "Yes? Where's the damn dinner?" It's on the stove. Just needs a minute. Always a minute." His voice rose like a wave breaking over the furniture. The whiskey glass shattered as it hit the floor. Carla rushed forward, kneeling to gather the shards with shaking fingers. "Don't," she whispered to herself. "Don't make it worse." Upstairs, Lila heard the crash and stiffened. Her chest tightened with the memory of other nights. The shouting, the apologies, the silence afterward. She pressed her hands against her ears, but even through her palms, she could hear it. The sound of fear, raw and familiar. Ray's footsteps stomped toward the kitchen. "You think I don't see how you look at me? Like I'm some monster?" "I didn't—" "Liar!" The blow came fast. Not a punch, just a shove, but enough to send Carla stumbling against the counter. The candle toppled, flames snuffing out in the spill of stew. Darkness rushed in again. "Ray, please! Don't you please me? You made her weak. You made her useless." He turned, his anger seeking a new target. "Where's the girl?" Carla's heart stuttered. She's upstairs, asleep." Ray started for the stairs. That was when Lila moved. She didn't think, just acted. The years of quiet observation, of learning when to hide, had taught her something else. When to run. She slipped out of her room and down the narrow back hallway that led to the mudroom. Her feet were bare, her breath visible in the dark. She could hear Ray's voice rising, the creak of the stair railing under his weight. She reached the back door. It was locked. He always kept it that way after dark. Her hands trembled as she turned the bolt, praying it wouldn't squeak. The wind outside howled like something ancient and furious. "Lila!" Ray's voice echoed from upstairs. She froze for a heartbeat, then twisted the handle and ran. The door banged open, slamming against the siding. Cold rushed in like water. Lila darted into the night, the snow swallowing her in seconds. She slipped once, twice, her breath burning her throat. Behind her, the house loomed, a single crooked shape against the storm. Ray's shadow appeared in the doorway, but he didn't step out. The blizzard was too strong, his drunken anger dulled by the sting of the wind. He shouted something, her name, a curse she couldn't tell, before the storm devoured the sound. Carla stood behind him, trembling, one hand on the frame. "Ray, stop! She'll freeze." He turned, eyes wild. "Then maybe she'll learn." He slammed the door shut. For a moment, only the wind spoke. Carla's mind splintered between terror and disbelief. She grabbed her coat and phone, but Ray snatched both from her hands. "You call anyone? I'll make sure they never find her," he hissed. His words smelled of alcohol and venom. Carla backed away, tears streaking her face. Upstairs, a light flickered and died. Somewhere deep inside, the illusion she'd built, of family, of redemption, cracked completely. Outside, Lila stumbled through the snowdrifts. Her slippers were gone. She'd lost them crossing the porch. The cold gnawed at her toes, the wind cutting through her sweater like blades. She followed the faint glow of a street lamp, a single blur of light in the storm. Every step hurt. Every breath tasted of iron. She tried to call for help, but her voice came out as a whisper swallowed by the wind. The snow thickened, erasing everything, road, fences, even the sound of her own heartbeat. Then, faintly, she heard something else. A bark. Deep, sharp, close. Through the swirling white, a figure approached. A man in a dark police jacket, flashlight beam cutting through the blizzard. Beside him trotted a large German shepherd, fur the color of storm clouds and rust, its movements purposeful and strong. "Hey!" the man shouted, his voice barely audible. "Hey, kid!" Lila tried to wave but collapsed onto her knees. The dog bounded ahead, sniffing the air, its breath coming out in white bursts. It stopped beside her, lowered its body, and let out a low whine. Its eyes, intelligent, alert, met hers. Warmth radiated from its thick coat as it pressed close. The officer reached them within seconds. He was tall, late 30s, with a weather-beaten face and eyes that held the kind of tiredness that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from seeing too much. His name tag read Walker. "I got you," he said, crouching. His voice was steady, calm, as if he'd done this 100 times before. "You're safe now?" He wrapped his coat around her trembling shoulders. The radio on his shoulder crackled. "Dispatch, this is Officer Walker. Found a minor, female, approximately 12, near County Road 6. Conscious but hypothermic. Requesting EMS. Copy that, Walker. ETA 10 minutes. The dog, Atlas, lay down beside the girl, pressing against her side. His ears twitched, alert to every sound in the storm. Walker adjusted his flashlight, glancing toward the direction she'd come from. There was no sign of the house, just an endless wall of white. "What's your name?" "Lila," she whispered. Her lips were blue, her eyes unfocused. "All right, Lila, you're gonna be okay." He pulled a thermal blanket from his pack and wrapped it tighter around her. "Atlas here's gonna help keep you warm, okay?" The German shepherd gave a small huff, almost as if agreeing. His tail flicked once, a silent reassurance. Walker kept talking, his tone soft and rhythmic. He knew that keeping her awake was as important as keeping her warm. "Where do you live, Lila?" Her eyes flicked toward the storm. "The house on the hill." Walker's expression tightened. He knew that house. Every cop in Willow Creek did. They'd been there twice last year for noise complaints and domestic concerns, but each time, nothing stuck. Reports closed, no follow-ups. Atlas nudged the girl's hand with his nose. She managed to curl her fingers into his fur. The warmth steadied her trembling. In the distance, faint red and blue lights began to shimmer through the snow. The sound of sirens was muffled, like a heartbeat under thick ice. Walker exhaled. "Hang in there, kid. Help's coming." Lila's eyes fluttered. "He'll find me." "Not tonight," Walker said firmly. "Not while I'm here." He lifted her carefully, Atlas circling protectively. Together, they moved toward the road, the storm swirling around them like a living thing. Walker's coat flapped open, the girl's small frame pressed against his chest. Atlas trotted ahead, guiding their steps through the snow-covered path. As they reached the patrol car, the heater already running, Walker placed her in the back seat, covering her with another blanket. Atlas jumped in beside her without command, curling into a half circle, his body a living shield. The girl's breathing slowed, steadied. Outside, Walker radioed one last time. "Child secured. Heading to County Hospital for immediate evaluation. Send CPS rep to meet us." When he looked back through the windshield, he saw Lila's face resting against Atlas's fur, her eyes half closed. The German shepherd's ears twitched, his gaze fixed on the storm outside, as if daring it to come closer. For the first time that night, the wind seemed to quiet. The screen fades to black. The hospital in Willow Creek was a small, weathered building that smelled faintly of antiseptic and pine cleaner. Its walls, painted a dull shade of mint green, tried and failed to hide decades of wear. Outside, the storm had calmed by morning, leaving behind a pale world where everything looked washed clean. Except the people inside. Officer Daniel Walker sat on a plastic chair outside the emergency ward, his parka draped over his knees, his eyes unfocused. He had the face of a man who'd forgotten how to rest, dark circles under blue-gray eyes, jawline rough with stubble. At 38, he carried himself like someone older, the posture of a man who once held a child's hand that wasn't there anymore. On his left wrist was a faint scar, barely visible, but he touched it sometimes without realizing. Beside his boots, Atlas lay curled like a shadow, head on his paws, chest rising and falling steadily. The German shepherd's fur was still damp from the snow, his dark sable coat gleaming faintly under the fluorescent lights. Nurses passed and slowed, smiling despite themselves. There was something calming about the dog, the way he seemed to belong both to duty and to compassion. Walker looked through the glass panel of the ER door. Lila Miller was there, small and pale against the white hospital bed, her hair spread like a halo of wet threads. Her lips were cracked, her wrists thin as twigs, bore faint marks half hidden under gauze. Electrodes traced small paths across her chest. A nurse murmured something to another. Mild hypothermia, dehydration, contusions. She's lucky. Lucky? Walker repeated under his breath, the word sour in his mouth. A doctor in scrubs approached, pulling off his gloves. Officer Walker? He rose, instinctively straight-backed. Yeah, I'm Dr. Helen Moore, the woman said. She was in her early 40s, tall, with calm gray eyes and a braid streaked with silver. There was a steady kindness in her movements, deliberate, never rushed. You found the girl? Yes, ma'am. She was outside maybe half an hour in the storm. No coat, no shoes. Dr. Moore nodded grimly. We've stabilized her temperature. She's conscious, but she's not speaking much. I've notified Child Protective Services. They'll be here within the hour. You'll need to stay for the report. Walker nodded. Of course. As she walked away, he noticed a small charm bracelet dangling from her wrist. A child's initials engraved on one charm. Something flickered behind her professional tone, a softness he recognized. People who'd lost something always spoke a little slower, as if words were heavier for them. He turned his gaze back to the window. Lila stirred, her eyes half opening. She looked around, frightened, then found Atlas through the glass. The dog lifted his head, ears perked, and that simple motion seemed to anchor her. Can he come in? Walker asked when Dr. Moore returned. She hesitated. Hospital policy rarely allowed animals inside emergency wards. But when she saw Lila's expression, that fragile trust breaking through fear, she sighed. Make it quick. Walker opened the door, and Atlas trotted forward, his nails clicking softly on the tile. The dog approached the bed, pausing just before touching the blanket, as if asking permission. Lila reached out, her small fingers brushing his fur. Her breathing steadied. Walker stood back, arms folded loosely, giving them space. That's Atlas, he said gently. He's a working dog, but he thinks he's part nurse. Lila managed a faint smile. He's warm. Yeah, Walker said. He's good at that. Dr. Moore checked her vitals, her voice calm. You're safe now, Lila. We just need to ask a few questions, okay? Can you tell me what happened? The girl's gaze drifted to the window, where snowflakes melted against the glass. He was angry again, she whispered. I ran. Dr. Moore wrote something on her clipboard but said nothing. Walker stepped closer. Was it your stepfather, Ray Miller? Lila hesitated, biting her lip until it turned white. Then she nodded. Has he hurt you before? She didn't answer, just pulled the blanket higher, her shoulders curling in. The silence said enough. Dr. Moore's pen stopped moving. I'll file a mandatory report to CPS and SPD, she said quietly, and I'll include her x-rays. There are older fractures that never healed properly. Someone needs to look into that. Walker exhaled through his nose, slow and heavy. We will. An hour later, Claire Jennings, a social worker from CPS, arrived. She was in her early 30s, petite, with sharp eyes softened by exhaustion. Her voice was careful, almost musical, a tone built from years of coaxing truth from frightened children. She greeted Walker and Dr. Moore before sitting by the bed. Hi, sweetheart. My name's Claire. I help make sure kids are safe. Is it okay if we talk for a bit? Lila nodded slightly. As Claire spoke, Walker stood near the door, hands clasped behind his back, eyes flicking between the girl and the clock. The longer he listened, the tighter his jaw became. He'd seen too many cases like this, houses that looked normal from the outside, neighbors who said they seemed fine. He'd filled out reports, checked boxes, moved on. But something about Lila's voice, the fragile steadiness of it, lodged deep in his chest. Claire asked gently, Do you have anyone else we can call? An aunt, a friend, maybe a teacher? Lila shook her head. Mom says we don't need anyone. Walker noticed the wording. Mom says, a learned isolation. After an hour, Claire closed her notebook. We'll assign a temporary guardian until court approval. She can't go back there. Dr. Moore nodded. I'll keep her overnight. For observation. Her injuries are consistent with ongoing abuse. You'll have medical records to back your report. Walker leaned against the wall, his hand absently resting on Atlas's head. The German shepherd had lain down beside the hospital bed, his eyes half-lidded but alert. Claire turned to Walker. "You said neighbors reported disturbances?" "Yeah, Mrs. Dempsey, lives across the road. She called dispatch twice last fall. Both times officers responded, but no one pressed charges." "That'll change," Claire said, her tone crisp. "We have more than enough probable cause for a search and removal order." Walker nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. If they'd listened earlier, he clenched his jaw, forcing the thought away. By evening, the hospital grew quiet. The storm outside had softened into a steady drift of snow, flakes falling like slow confessions. Walker sat by the hallway window, writing his report under the weak hum of fluorescent light. He detailed everything: location, time, condition, statements. Every word felt heavier than the last. Atlas stirred, rising to sit beside him. The dog pressed his muzzle against Walker's knee. "Yeah, I know," Walker muttered. "Don't carry it all, right?" He looked down at the dog's intelligent eyes. "But someone's gotta." Behind them, Dr. Moore approached, carrying a folder. "You did good tonight." Walker didn't look up. "Feels like too little, too late." She sat across from him, her tone steady. "You found her before the storm did. That matters." He said nothing. Dr. Moore hesitated, then added softly, "You've lost someone, haven't you?" Walker's eyes flicked up. "A daughter, 6 years ago. Car accident." The doctor nodded slowly, not with pity, but understanding. "Then you know what saving one feels like." Her words hung in the air like something fragile, almost holy. Later that night, Walker went to check on Lila one last time before leaving. She was asleep, curled slightly, her hand resting on Atlas's back. The dog didn't move, only glanced at Walker as if to say, "She's fine. You can rest." Walker smiled faintly. "Yeah, buddy? Keep watch." He turned off the overhead light, leaving only the soft blue glow from the heart monitor. Outside, the world was white and still. As he stepped out of the ward, his radio crackled. "Walker, this is dispatch. CPS and ADA request your presence tomorrow morning. Warrant review for the Miller residence." He clicked his radio. "Copy that." He looked once more through the window. The girl, the dog, the calm after chaos. Then walked down the hall, boots echoing softly against tile. For the first time in months, he didn't feel the weight of loss pressing so hard against his chest. Sometimes salvation doesn't arrive in thunder or light. Sometimes it's just a girl whispering her truth, and a dog refusing to leave her side. Morning came gray and brittle, the kind of light that never fully warms the ground. The storm had left Willow Creek draped in silence. Every branch glazed with ice, every roof bowed beneath white. Officer Daniel Walker parked his cruiser at the bottom of the hill, engine idling in the cold. He stared through the windshield at the Miller house, the house that had kept its secrets too long. Beside him, Atlas sat alert, amber eyes fixed on the front porch. Frost clung to the dog's whiskers. His breath rose in soft plumes. Walker reached down and ruffled his neck. "Easy, boy. Today we do this by the book." He stepped out, boots crunching on the frozen gravel. Behind him, another car pulled up, an unmarked SUV carrying Claire Jennings from CPS and Detective Marla Chen from the county division. Claire exited first, her brown hair tucked into a neat bun, clipboard clutched to her chest. Her eyes were tired but determined. Detective Chen, a woman in her mid-40s with a crisp posture and a voice like cold steel, scanned the property before speaking. "Warrants in order," Chen said, handing Walker the folded papers. "Signed by ADA Turner at 7:30 a.m., full search of premises, evidence of abuse, neglect, and unlawful restraint." Walker nodded, his jaw tight. "Let's keep this clean." They moved up the path in silence, snow crunching underfoot. The house looked smaller in daylight, stripped of its menace. But Walker knew better. Evil didn't always shout. Sometimes it whispered behind closed curtains. He knocked once, then again. No answer. He gestured to Chen. She turned the knob, and the door creaked open with the sound of splitting ice. Inside, the air was heavy. Stale tobacco, spilled whiskey, and something sourer beneath. The living room was dim, curtains drawn. A TV flickered soundlessly on a static channel. Ray Miller stood by the couch, unshaven and sullen, a man cornered but still defiant. His eyes flicked from Walker to Chen to Claire, calculating. "What's this about?" he slurred. Walker held up the paper. "Search warrant. Step aside, Mr. Miller." Ray's jaw tightened. "You think you can just barge into my house? You lost that privilege when a 12-year-old ran barefoot into a snowstorm." Ray's gaze darted toward the stairs, where Carla appeared, pale, sleepless, robe cinched tight. "Ray, just let them—" "Shut up," he snapped. Atlas growled low, the sound vibrating in his chest. Walker didn't move, but his voice came out steady. "That's enough. Sit down, both of you. You'll have your say later." Chen began photographing the living room. Claire checked the kitchen, noting empty bottles, unwashed dishes, and a space heater tipped on its side. Walker moved methodically, documenting injuries to the structure, the broken door frame, the dented wall near the stairs. Then Atlas caught a scent. His ears pricked, his head tilted toward the back. Hallway. Walker noticed immediately. "What is it, boy?" The dog padded down the narrow corridor, nose brushing along the baseboards until he reached the basement door. He stopped, sat, and looked back at Walker. "Basement," Walker said. Chen nodded. "Go ahead." The stairs groaned under their weight as they descended. The air grew damp, colder than the snow outside. A single bulb swung overhead, casting weak circles of light. Dust motes floated like ghosts. Atlas sniffed along the far wall, tail stiff. He stopped near an old shelving unit stacked with paint cans and boxes. His nose pressed against one section of paneling, and he whined softly. Walker knelt. The panel sounded hollow when he tapped it. He exchanged a glance with Chen. "Get me a screwdriver." Chen handed him one from her kit. Walker pried at the edge until the board gave way with a soft crack. Behind it lay a small cavity, just big enough for a child's hands. Inside, a tin box, rusted and cold to the touch. Walker eased it out and set it on a tarp. The lid stuck, then opened with a metallic sigh. Inside, a notebook wrapped in plastic, a few folded papers, and something else. A small charm bracelet identical to the one Lila had worn in the hospital. Claire inhaled sharply. "Her journal." Walker nodded. "Chain of custody starts now. You're my witness." Chen took photos before sealing the contents into evidence bags. The air around them felt heavier, not with fear, but with truth pressing to the surface. Walker scanned the room. Near the support beam, he noticed something else. Old rope fibers on the floor, half buried under dust. Beside them, a wooden chair with one leg cracked. Chen crouched to inspect it. "Looks like restraint marks?" "Add it to evidence." Upstairs, Ray's voice rose. "You can't prove anything. You people think you know us?" Walker climbed the stairs, motioning for Atlas to heel. At the top, he found Ray standing near the window, fists clenched. "Mr. Miller," Walker said, calm but cold. "You're under arrest for felony child abuse and endangerment. You have the right to remain silent." Ray laughed, a jagged sound. "You don't have proof." "We have plenty," Walker said evenly. "Her medical reports, your neighbor's calls, and now her written account, plus the physical evidence in your basement." Ray's bravado faltered. "That brat lies," Atlas growled again, louder this time, baring his teeth. Walker's voice dropped to steel. "Say one more word about her." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ray looked away. Chen approached, handcuffs glinting in the light. "Ray Miller, you're coming with us." Carla, standing near the wall, began to cry softly. "Please." "I didn't know it was that bad." Claire turned to her, voice gentle but firm. "You had chances to report it. Silence is still a choice." Carla sank into a chair, covering her face. Walker gestured toward the door. "Take him." As they led Ray out, the snow started falling again, light, lazy flakes drifting through the air. Walker watched as the man's boots left deep tracks down the path, marks that would soon disappear. Inside, the house felt different, hollow, almost relieved. Claire stood by the window, clutching the sealed journal. She wrote everything, she murmured, dates, times, even how her mom used to tell her not to make him angry. Walker exhaled. "That'll hold up in court. Will it be enough?" He looked around at the quiet ruin of the house, the broken furniture, the half-empty bottle, the faint outline of a handprint on the wall. It has to be. Atlas sniffed once more, circling the room before lying down by the door. He seemed to understand that his job here was done. Walker walked to the window and looked toward the hospital across town, visible only as a faint shape behind the white. "She's safe now," he whispered. Hours later, at the SPD evidence room, Walker watched as the sealed bags were logged. Every label, every signature had to be perfect. One mistake, and a defense lawyer could unravel it. He worked quietly, his movements efficient. Claire approached, her coat buttoned to the throat. "We'll submit everything to the ADA by noon. She's pushing for an immediate protective order." "Good," Walker said. "You'll testify?" "I'll be there." She hesitated. "You care about this one." Walker didn't answer right away. "She reminds me what's left to fight for." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Moore, Lila's stable, asked if Atlas could visit. Walker smiled faintly. "Tell her we'll come by." As he left the station, snowflakes melted against his jacket. The sky was clearing at last, a sliver of blue cutting through the gray. That afternoon, Walker returned to the hospital. Lila was sitting up this time, a faint bandage around her wrist, a book open on her lap. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting softly. "Did you go back?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, we found your journal." Her eyes widened. "It was still there?" "It was. You helped more than you know." Atlas padded forward, resting his head on the bed. Lila reached down, fingers burying into his fur. "He found it, didn't he?" Walker chuckled. "You could say that." Outside the window, the snow began to fall again. Not heavy this time, but soft, like a benediction. The world wasn't fixed yet, but for the first time, it felt like it could be. The courthouse of Silver County stood on a rise above Willow Creek, its stone steps glazed with morning frost. The air was crisp, bright, almost too clean for what the day would bring. Inside, the hallway hummed with the low murmur of reporters, attorneys, and clerks shuffling papers. Officer Daniel Walker waited outside courtroom 3B, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. He wore his uniform, polished but practical, and beside him sat Atlas, alert and composed in his service vest. The German Shepherd had been granted a special permit by the presiding judge to remain in the courtroom, not as a police dog today, but as an emotional support animal for a child. Walker glanced toward the corridor, where Claire Jennings, the social worker, guided Lila Miller forward. The girl wore a pale blue dress, her hair neatly brushed and tied back. She looked fragile but focused, holding a small stuffed rabbit, the same one she'd clung to the night of the storm. Her step was hesitant until Atlas rose and padded toward her. The moment she placed her hand on his head, her breathing eased. Claire leaned down and whispered, "Remember, sweetheart, you're safe. You don't have to be brave all at once." Lila nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "He's here, isn't he?" "Yes," Claire said gently. "But he can't touch you anymore." Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. The flag hung behind the bench, and the judge, Honorable Ruth Merriman, a woman in her 60s with kind but sharp eyes, reviewed her notes. The gallery was quiet except for the shuffle of chairs. At the defense table sat Ray Miller, hands cuffed, his jaw tense. His lawyer, Frank Dorsey, whispered to him, a slick man in a dark suit, voice smooth as oil. At the opposite table sat Assistant District Attorney Elena Turner, her brown hair tied neatly, face composed but fierce. When the judge entered, all rose. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Merriman." "Be seated," she said, her voice clear. "This court is now in session in the matter of State of Montana versus Raymond Miller, case number 1248B. Charges include felony child abuse, neglect, and endangerment." Ray stared straight ahead, expression cold. Carla Miller was not in the room. The court had ordered her temporary psychological evaluation and restricted contact with her daughter. Walker took a seat near the front, Atlas lying beside him, watchful. Ada Turner stood. "Your Honor, the state will present evidence and witness testimony to establish a clear pattern of prolonged physical and psychological abuse inflicted by the defendant upon his stepdaughter, minor Lila Miller. The defense attorney rose. The defense contends that the so-called evidence was exaggerated by overzealous law enforcement and a frightened child misinterpreting discipline as cruelty. A ripple of discomfort passed through the Ewell courtroom. Judge Merriman fixed Dorsey with a look that froze him mid-sentence. "You'll refrain from character attacks, counselor. Proceed carefully." The prosecution began with Dr. Helen Moore. On the stand, she spoke with quiet authority, explaining the medical evidence, bruises of varying ages, untreated fractures, malnutrition. She laid out photographs and x-rays, each one a silent indictment. The defense tried to downplay them as accidents, but Dr. Moore's steady voice cut through. "These are not the injuries of a clumsy child," she said. "They are the injuries of someone who learned that pain is predictable." Next came Officer Walker. His testimony was precise, professional. He described the night he found Lila, the search of the house, the discovery of the hidden box. ADA Turner asked, "Officer, when you entered that basement, what did you find?" "A hollow space behind a false panel," Walker said. Inside was a tin box containing the victim's handwritten journal. The entries were consistent with the injuries and timelines documented by medical reports. "And who located the hiding spot?" Walker smiled faintly. "Atlas, my canine partner." The courtroom softened for a moment. Even the judge's lips curved slightly. Dorsey stood for cross-examination. "Officer, isn't it true that this dog of yours has no formal certification in evidence recovery?" Walker met his gaze evenly. "He's not certified for search warrants, no, but he's trained to detect trace human scent." He indicated the area where evidence was found. The discovery was then verified by Detective Marla Chen, whose body camera footage is part of the record. Dorsey hesitated, then shifted tactics. "And you have a personal attachment to the child, do you not?" Walker's voice stayed calm. "I have an obligation to protect her, same as anyone else who wears this badge." Ada Turner stood again. "The state would like to enter Exhibit F, the defendant's recorded reaction at the time of arrest." The screen flickered to life. On video, Ray shouted as he was handcuffed, "She lies! They all lie!" The sound filled the room, heavy and sharp. Lila flinched. Atlas raised his head, pressed closer to her leg. Walker turned slightly, watching the girl steady herself. The child who once whispered was now facing her monster in full daylight. By afternoon, it was Lila's turn. The courtroom emptied except for essential personnel, judge, attorneys, jury, and Walker seated quietly nearby. For her protection, Lila testified from the side room with a one-way window, her voice broadcast through the speaker. Ada Turner's tone was soft. "Lila, do you remember what happened the night you ran away?" "Yes," Lila said. Her voice trembled at first, then strengthened. "He was yelling again. He hit Mom. I ran out the back door." "Why did you hide your journal?" "Because I knew he'd tear it up. He didn't like when I wrote. He said truth makes people weak." Her words carried across the courtroom like wind through broken glass. Dorsey rose for cross-examination, but approached carefully, aware that one wrong question could alienate the jury. "Lila, is it possible you misunderstood your stepfather's intentions?" Atlas lifted his head, eyes fixed on the man. Lila hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "You can't misunderstand a fist." Even the court reporter paused before resuming typing. When her testimony ended, Lila exhaled shakily. Walker met her eyes through the glass. She managed a small, tired smile. The closing arguments were brief, but powerful. Ada Turner spoke with measured conviction. "This case is not about punishment. It's about protection. The protection that failed too long. The defendant hid behind silence and fear, but truth, once spoken, doesn't hide again." Dorsey tried to argue for leniency, citing unemployment, stress, and alcohol dependency, but his words felt hollow in the still air. When the jury returned, the courtroom went silent. On count 1, felony child abuse, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2, child endangerment, guilty. On count 3, neglect, guilty. Ray Miller's shoulders sagged, disbelief replacing arrogance. The judge's gavel fell once, clear and final. As the courtroom emptied, Lila sat quietly in the witness room. The door opened, and Walker entered, hat in hand. "It's over," he said softly. "He can't hurt you anymore." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Do I have to go back there?" "No," Walker said. "You're going somewhere safe, somewhere warm." Atlas nudged her hand, tail wagging once. Lila smiled for real this time. "He always knows when it's okay to breathe again." Walker chuckled. "Yeah, he's got a gift for that." Outside, the late afternoon light poured through the tall windows, catching in the dust motes like sparks. The sound of the judge's gavel still echoed faintly in the halls. Not just justice served, but peace beginning. Spring arrived slowly in Willow Creek, as if unsure it was welcome. The snow melted in hesitant rivulets that carved new paths through the hills, and the first green shoots broke through soil that had known only silence for months. The town was changing, in small, quiet ways. People smiled more easily at the grocery store. The postman whistled again, and the air no longer carried the sharp tension that once lived on the North Ridge where the Miller house stood. That house had been boarded up, its windows nailed shut, its name removed from the property register. To the rest of the town, it was just another place for sale, but to a few, it was a scar that finally began to heal. In a cream-colored farmhouse on Maple Lane, laughter drifted through the morning light. The Bennett family had lived in Willow Creek for generations, people known not for wealth, but for warmth. Grace Bennett, a woman in her late 40s with auburn hair and a gentle voice, carried a tray of muffins from the oven, the smell of cinnamon filling the air. She had the calm presence of someone who had seen both joy and sorrow and learned not to rush either. Her husband, Tom Bennett, a school custodian with a broad frame and easy humor, sat at the table repairing a fishing reel. Their home always had an extra chair, an extra slice of pie, an extra room for anyone who needed it. And now, that room belonged to Lila. She sat by the window in her new bedroom, sunlight spilling across her desk. On the sill rested a small photograph, her and Atlas, taken the day before, in the backyard. Atlas was lying in the grass, his tongue lolling out, one paw stretched toward her, as if he'd claimed her permanently. Lila's hair was longer now, her cheeks less hollow. There were still shadows in her eyes, but they were softer, no longer made of fear, but of memory. Some nights, she still woke to the echo of a door slamming or the faint smell of whiskey in her dreams. But each time, when she opened her eyes, she saw the soft glow of her nightlight shaped like a star, and the sound she heard wasn't shouting. It was Atlas breathing beside her bed. Every week, she met Dr. Helen Moore for therapy sessions at the hospital. Dr. Moore always brought peppermint tea and a small sketchbook for Lila to doodle in. "Healing," she said once, "isn't a straight road, sweetheart. It's more like a garden. Some days you water flowers, some days you pull weeds, and sometimes you just sit and wait for the sun." That morning, Lila prepared for a field trip organized by her new school. Grace stood by the door, adjusting her scarf. "You've got your lunch packed?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good girl. And remember, if you feel tired or anything gets too noisy, you tell Miss Harper, all right?" "I will." Atlas trotted in, his tail sweeping the floor. Though officially still Officer Walker's dog, he had become part of Lila's daily life. After the trial, Walker had filed the necessary paperwork to allow Atlas part-time service as her emotional support companion. The form was clinical, but the meaning behind it was sacred, a promise. When the school bus arrived, Atlas gave a single bark as if to remind her, "You're safe, but I'm watching." Lila laughed, a sound still rare but growing. "See you later, Atlas." Grace watched from the porch as the bus rolled down the road, her expression touched with quiet pride. "She's got courage, that one," she murmured. Tom looked up from his toolbox. "She's got that dog, too. Makes all the difference." That afternoon, Officer Walker drove to the Bennett's home. He had traded his uniform for jeans and a flannel shirt, but his posture still carried the discipline of service. He parked beneath the oak tree and whistled softly. Atlas appeared at once, bounding toward him, tail wagging furiously. "There you are, partner." Walker knelt, rubbing behind the dog's ears. "Been keeping her safe?" Atlas barked once, affirmative. Grace opened the door. "Officer Walker, we weren't expecting you till later." "Just Daniel today," he said with a smile. Thought I'd drop by, see how she's settling in. She's doing well, Grace said warmly. Still has rough nights, but fewer of them. She's starting to laugh again. You should see her in the garden. She and Tom planted tulips last week. Walker looked toward the yard. Through the fence, the faint pink tips of flowers reached toward the sunlight. She's tough, he said softly. Grace nodded. Toughness is surviving. Healing is allowing yourself to feel safe afterward. She's learning that. They spoke a while longer, sharing updates. Then the bus arrived, and Lila came running down the driveway, her backpack bouncing, eyes bright. Atlas rushed to meet her, circling like a storm of joy. "Daniel!" she cried. "Look what I made at school!" She held up a drawing, a child's rendition of a snowy hill, a girl, a dog, and a man in a police coat. Above them, written in careful block letters, "The night I didn't freeze." Walker swallowed hard. "That's beautiful, Lila." She grinned. "I gave it to my teacher, but I made a copy for you." He took it gently, folding it with care. "I'll keep it safe." They walked together to the porch. Atlas trotted behind, content. Lila sat on the steps, petting him. "Do I have to go back to court again?" she asked quietly. Walker shook his head. "No, kiddo, that part's over." "Then what happens now?" He glanced at Grace, then back at her. "Now you get to live, go to school, grow flowers, be 12. She nodded, processing the words like an oath. "And him? Will he stay away forever?" "Yes," Walker said. "Forever." There was silence, broken only by the wind moving through the trees. Then Lila smiled faintly. "Good. I don't want to hate him. Anymore. I just want to forget." Grace touched her shoulder gently. "Forgetting isn't necessary, sweetheart. Remembering without hurting, that's real freedom." Walker looked toward the horizon, where the last snow still clung to the mountains like lace. "She's right. And you're getting there." That evening, as the sun began to sink, Walker lingered by his car. The sky burned gold, fading to violet. The Bennett's white picket fence glowed in the light, and beyond it, Lila ran with Atlas across the grass. Her laughter echoed, pure, unguarded. He thought of his own daughter then, the one he'd lost 6 years ago, how she used to run barefoot in summer fields, hair flying like sunlight. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the ache of grief, only a soft warmth, as if his child's memory had finally found a resting place inside this moment. Grace joined him on the porch. "You know, Daniel," she said, "I think God sends people to each other for reasons we don't always see." He nodded. "Yeah. Sometimes he doesn't calm the storm. He just sends someone to walk through it with you." Atlas barked, breaking the quiet, chasing after Lila's thrown stick. The sound made them both smile. "Thank you," Grace said, "for not giving up on her." Walker shook his head. "She's the one who never gave up." As twilight deepened, Lila stopped by the fence, catching her breath. The wind lifted her hair, and for a moment she looked older, not in years, but in peace. Atlas sat beside her, tail sweeping slow arcs in the grass. "Daniel!" she called. "Listen!" A soft chiming sound filled the air. Walker looked toward the porch where a small wind chime swayed, a new one he had hung that morning, silver and delicate. "It's beautiful," she said. "Whenever you hear it," he told her, "that means everything's okay." Lila smiled, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. "Then, it'll never stop." The camera would pull back then, high above the fence, above the field, showing the girl and the dog bathed in golden light, laughter fading into the hum of the chime. No dramatic music, no words. Just the sound of peace. The kind that comes not from forgetting the storm, but from knowing you survived it. Sometimes God does not calm the storm around us. He calms the storm within us. Lila's story reminds us that even in the darkest winter, God sends help in unexpected ways. A stranger, a friend, or even a loyal dog to guide us back to safety. Miracles are not always thunder and light. They are quiet moments when hope survives and love finds a way. In our own lives, we all face battles. We never chose, but faith gives us the strength to rise again. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment. Tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe for more stories of faith and courage, and may God bless you and your family with peace and healing. Type Amen. If you believe miracles still happen every day,